Welcome back to the YouTube channel. My name is Saman Habibi, your real estate agent for the Durham region. Today I'm here with a special guest, Clinton from Hom Drafting Services. Clinton, thank you for being here.
Oh, it's my pleasure being here.
We've had the privilege of working with each other on various projects.
For sure.
Myself, my clients. And Clinton brings a lot of value to the table because you're the main person or the first person that essentially gets the project up and going in terms of designing and dealing with the city and making sure that all the boxes are checked off in order for the project to get the correct permits in place and for us to start the project. So thanks for being here and sharing your knowledge with us today.
Oh, you're welcome.
Absolutely. So what we're going to be doing today is talking about what's happening in the Durham region from an investment perspective. So Clinton and I have worked a lot on the traditional investing strategy here in the Durham region, which has been the purchase a bungalow and do a duplex conversion. And that has worked very well for a lot of people, but I think there's a shift now as prices increase. We need to find ways to increase density and increase the number of units that we can get on a single lot in order to make the numbers work to make up for the increased price. So that's what we're going to be doing today. We're going to be talking about what's new, how you can increase density on your property, and how you can tap into the real estate that you have, the land that you have, by creating additional units. Awesome. So why don't we get your perspective? So what are you seeing in the field? You know, are people still doing the duplex conversions, or are people focusing in on other things now?
Yeah, for sure. Well, as you know, the market has changed dramatically over the last little while. So as we were going through the pandemic, prices started to escalate, and they got to a point where, again, it didn't really make sense to just be adding one unit to these properties.
Right.
The numbers wouldn't work. So fortunately, over the last little while, we've seen several municipalities who have either started to work on or have already initiated an accessory dwelling unit bylaw that allows for not only the unit that was in-house, which we had before, but also the potential of putting a third unit on the property, and which is making the numbers make sense. So I would still say, for the most part, 60% of the work that I do is still kind of focused around, real estate investors doing the accessory dwelling unit in the house. But there's definitely been a shift in the market towards buying up properties that have older houses, and potentially knocking them down or intensifying them. I have several properties around even Oshawa where gentlemen have purchased the property, they're knocking the place down, and they're going to build purpose-built triplexes, right? Because the zoning allows for it. Now, if you're talking about most residential properties, they don't necessarily allow for an apartment building on the property, and in those applications, I'm starting to see this shift towards the ADUs.
Okay, so a couple of really important keys there. So let's start at the beginning. In terms of municipalities, so when I initially have conversations with people, people are asking, how are the municipalities? Are they supporting you during this process, or is there a lot of pushback? So what are you seeing? What are your thoughts? So if we look at the Durham region, starting in the East End, Clarington, Oshawa, Whitby, Ajax, Pickering, would you say that they're all cooperative with you during that process?
If we're talking about in-house apartments, 100%.
Yeah.
As we progress into this new stage of ADUs, there will probably be some pushback, but for the most part, that's taken care of right at the council stage.
Right.
As they're creating these bylaws, the neighborhoods have the opportunity to have their input. Once those bylaws are in place, as long as you're able to meet the criteria of what they're asking for zoning, it's not really any pushback because all of those things have been taken into consideration.
Okay, so accessory apartments in the basement. So if you have a traditional bungalow, the suite that you put in the basement, that is, you're saying they're pretty cooperative. They're helping you because the bylaw has been established, and as long as you do everything by the bylaw, there's really not a lot of pushback there. Yes. In terms of timelines, what are the timelines looking like right now for those projects?
That's a great question. I mean, again, we've seen quite a shift over the last couple of years. There was a period of time where the wait times for permits was extremely extended. There were so many people who were applying for permits. The last 2 years, 2021 and 2020, most municipalities were seeing the largest influx of permits they've ever seen. Yeah. Some even doubling what their highest numbers have ever been. So there was a lot of work to be done. Again, during that time period, a lot of people that we didn't expect who were going to retire until 5 years down the road, all of a sudden were met with these criteria where they had to work at home, they had to work with more technology, and some people, you can't teach an old dog new tricks, and decided this is a good time for retirement. So there was a large gap as far as the people who were actually doing the work as well as the amount of work that was being done. So timelines really got extended. I would say in the last little while, we've started to see them come back down to an equilibrium. in most cases for responses from municipalities, we're looking at about 2 to 3 weeks for comments now, which is reasonable. Like they have a legislation in place from Ontario that says 2 weeks is when they're supposed to respond.
Yeah.
There was some grace period during COVID and everything like that, but now we're starting to see that number come back down.
Are they back in the office or are they still working from home?
Some are, some aren't. So again, we've seen such a change in the dynamic. You know, there are a lot of planners that I reach out to, plans examiners who are just working from home still.
Yeah.
You know, they come into the office 1 or 2 times a week, which again creates a bit of a challenge when you're trying to reach people. It helps having people's cell phone numbers, but you don't always get those. But you know, having a direct contact where you could get into the office and speak to people still isn't the way it was. You know,
you have those numbers though?
Maybe. I have a few.
That's awesome. And then in terms of triplexes, right? You're saying there's a lot of tear downs. I don't know if there's a lot, but you were saying there's tear downs. So the tear down properties where people are buying properties that come down for a purpose-built triplex. Are those the traditional, like the 1920s, 30s, or early 1900s, the two-story homes that people are tearing down, or are they doing that with bungalows as well?
It depends on the property. It depends on the zoning too, right? I mean, obviously, if you have a property that's zoned, Oshawa was a great example, R1C, where it's single-family detached dwelling, you're not going to tear that building down probably to build a triplex because you'd have to rezone the whole property. But a great example is right down Bloor Street. If you drive down Bloor from about Harmony to Simcoe, you'll see all these buildings that have 3 doors on the front. You can see they're newer buildings. You know, they're you know, within 10 to 15 years old, and they're all buildings where people have gone in, they've demolished what was there, and they've built the purpose-built triplexes because they have the potential to do that. The zoning is R5 or R5B, so that it allows for those additional units. Yeah,
and I guess if people are interested in identifying those areas, you can go on the Oshawa interactive map. So I think actually, if you just search, sorry, go ahead.
A lot of the municipalities are going this way. So as you know, there's been a lot of changes over the last couple of years. One of the big changes has been the fact that a lot of that information is now being posted online. So even Clarington has an Argus website. Oshawa's had it for years.
Right.
Whitby is still amazing how big Whitby is, but they are still, everything's paper copy. You can't find that information on it.
How much money is there, and they're still...
But the potential for finding that information is much more accessible on a lot of their websites.
No, that's awesome. So, okay, and I think you gave out a huge nugget there. Bloor Street, Harmony to Simcoe.
I might have. I have one right now, that I'm working on for a client where that's exactly that, where it's actually a double wide lot and has the potential of doing semis and then building them in the purpose-built triplexes. So we'll end up with 6 units when it's all set.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And I guess if people are doing it, do you know if these are on-market properties or off-market properties? Like, are they coming off MLS?
This one that I'm specifically talking about, I believe they found off-market. The potentials are out there, but I mean, if you're looking for a property to do that, first off, you have to find the right zoning. And most likely, you're probably looking for a building that's fairly dilapidated, right? You don't want to be taking down a nice building to do it.
And can you just high level, and we'll just put it out there that what we talk about, of course, isn't, it's not going to apply to every single property. Every single property will be different. But typically on the triplexes, purpose-built triplexes, what kind of frontage and what kind of depth are we looking at?
Well, I mean,
like at minimum, let's say.
Yeah, again, it totally depends on the lot. But if you don't have something that's 80 feet deep, because you got to take into consideration, not only are you going to have the building, but with a triplex, you're now into site plan control, which means not only enough parking, accessible parking spot, you need to have a certain amount of green space, you need to have an amenity space, some place where people can set up barbecues and a picnic table or something like that, a place for garbage, and a place for snow removal. So there's a lot of things to take into consideration that have to be on that lot. So anything that's less than 80 feet, I don't think is probably a great fit for that. The other thing to take into consideration is your width. And in most cases, you're looking at a property that's probably in the 11-meter frontage. Again, you still need to maintain your 50% green space at the front, or 30% for the entire lot, depending on how it's being set up. So
11. So it'd be minimum, you want to aim for 38 feet, 36, 38 feet by 80 minimum. The
same type of properties we were looking at for frontage when we were doing, a bungalow doing an accessory unit here in Oshawa. Very similar for the width that you're looking for. We can make that work on there, do like a 900 square foot or 950 square foot footprint. But yeah, without at least, you know, about 80 feet to be able to put a building on there, put your parking, and still meet all those other requirements, it's a challenge.
Okay, good stuff. And then let's talk about so if you're doing a triplex, purpose-built triplex, and how do we manage development fees? What's going on there?
That's a great question. So if I were to build a triplex today, I would, and let's say it's vacant land.
What are development charges?
Okay, great question. So there are here in the Durham region, you're usually looking at 3 different types of development charges. Development charges for the school board, development charges for the region, and development charges for the actual municipality, right? Here in Oshawa, when you add all those together, right now, it's somewhere around $50,000 per unit. And that's for residential. A little different for commercial. It's based on square foot, but for residential, since that's what we're talking about, it's all based per unit. Now, if I have a vacant land and I build a house, I pay development charges for that house. If I take a vacant land and I build 2 units on it, I pay development charges on 2 units. So now it's $100,000 to build it. However, if I build a building, a single family dwelling, and then I put an apartment in the basement, it's an accessory. It's not a duplex, and it's just in how the wording is. You still end up with 2 units, but you don't pay the development charges on the other unit.
Right.
So the reason why I say purpose-built triplexes is we go in and we build a single family dwelling, then we put an accessory on the second floor, and then we put another accessory after that permit closes in the basement. And by doing that, if there's already a house on the property and we knock it down, that development charge offsets the first single family dwelling, and then the accessories don't pay development charges. Whereas if you built a purpose-built triplex, put 3 units in right off the hop, now you're looking at $150,000 in development charges.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. And I think this is why working with someone who has done work in the region is very important, because I don't know if someone out of town would know this information or not. And you were mentioning something earlier about making sure that the square footage is smaller in each of the triplex units. Is that a relevant conversation?
Yeah, this has come up a few times in Oshawa. So again, it's all in the wording. If I built a duplex today, I could build both units the exact same size. Whether I wanted to build them side by side or one on top of the other, they can be the exact same size because it's a duplex. With a single family dwelling with an accessory, that accessory needs to be smaller than the original, right? Yeah. So same thing with an accessory building. Like, there's not a lot of municipalities that would let you build, a garage that's 3 times bigger than your house. Right. It's just not going to happen, right? Yeah. They want it to be smaller than what the actual use of the property is. So in that type of application, to avoid certain development fees, and it's not to say that you're going to avoid all the development fees if you're building it from brand new, but if you have let's say a 900 square foot footprint, and you have a 2-story building, and you put 1 unit to do the whole thing, and then you cut out a section for that secondary unit. Well, that secondary unit is going to be just slightly smaller than the main unit, and then the basement's going to be just slightly smaller than that. So we're not talking, it's got to be hundreds of square feet difference, but just being that little bit smaller allows it to fall into that category where it's an accessory, and therefore you don't usually end up having to pay the development charges on it.
Awesome. Good stuff. Well, guys, there you have it. We've talked a lot about triplexes in this video. So if you have any specific questions, or if you want to connect with Clinton on this topic, on this project, on a project that you have, we'll leave Clinton's contact information in the show notes below. And what's the best way for people to connect with you? Is it Instagram, email, phone?
Email is always a great way. info@homdesign.ca. So home without an E.
Awesome. There you go, guys.